You know, I love old things. I love old things that make sense. I love old things that make sense and are mechanical and are still working. And to me, it's just amazing to think about how many hands have been on this crank, how many different needles have been put in this machine, what kind of yarn they used, who wore these socks that came off, you know, like, where has this thing been, you know, for the last 110, 115 years. So I get excited just thinking about it. I think they're beautiful old machines, and for me, it's a way to also connect with other people that I wouldn't otherwise have ever met.
Same stuff yourself. And a few years ago, I decided to try something new, and one of the things I tried was spinning. And I have some hand spun over here because I really love to spin. And I'd always kind of been looking at those little machines. You know, I saw somebody at one of the fiber events that had one of these little machines, and I really wanted one. And about 3 years ago, the Sock Machine Society of America, believe it or not, there is a group, Circular Sock Machine Society of America. This group right here was having their annual convention in Nashville, Indiana. And I found out about it just a couple of days before the convention, took vacation off work and said, I got to go down there. Dragged my husband, who actually went because he was afraid I was going to spend like thousands of dollars, which was a really good thing because I didn't spend that much, so that's a little trick here. Because I did some research before I went down, and I saw one, and I really liked it. And the lady that sold it to me refurbishes. She's on the West Coast. And I bought an antique auto knitter. And Jill has a Laguerre, and she'll tell you maybe a little bit about Laguerres. But in the United States, beginning in the 1800s and extending on through the mid-1900s, these little machines were sold, mostly made in Canada. There was one company that made them with some success in the United States called the Gerhardt Company. And you see Gerhardt machines around quite often.
From Pennsylvania.
From Pennsylvania. They're actually from Clearfield, Pennsylvania. And Mark Gerhardt, a descendant of the original Gerhardt family, is in the process now of doing a family history and a kind of a pictorial of his family's machines. This particular machine was an auto knitter made in Canada. And it came to me by way of a woman in Seattle, and I don't know where she got it. I really don't know. But it's a good little machine. It has 2 cylinders, and the cylinder is this piece that has the needles that go around. It has 2 rubber dials, which match the cylinders. So it can make a circle, and you can see some of the things that it has there. It can also do ribbing, which is kind of an extra added attraction to these little machines, and a little trickier to do. I have weights on this machine. Everything, as you know, if any of you have used flatbed machines or you've watched any machines, everything has to be supported by a weight or it will lose its tension and it's just going to, you know, kind of flop all over everywhere. So when I get down to knitting a little further here, whoops, I'll take my rubber off here. I used all the antique machinery here today for this demonstration. This is an antique Swift. It's not situated very well on this table, but this actually came with these machines, and they were sold mail order by and large, and they were a lot of times sold to men. And many of the women who use them now, men and women both use them, will talk of their grandfathers having these machines and the women not being permitted to actually come near them. Apparently this was much too complicated and technical for a woman to learn and understand.
You can see them knitting in their suits.
And so we find that kind of amusing today, those of us who do this kind of work. And in the sock machine group, there are men and there are women, there are husbands and wives, there are fathers and sons. It's a very mixed group. But in the men that are involved, by and large, a lot of them also had fathers or grandfathers who used these machines, and they were for profit. So most of the folks that bought these by mail order were not just getting them to service their families and make socks for their families, but they were also doing it for profit. And the advertising for these machines actually talked about making a profit on these. And they would send the machine mail order to your home. No instructions other than what you're going to see here, and I have copies of some of the instructions that came with these machines. No salesman came out to help you. You kind of were on your own. And they even would send the yarn out, and then you would send back a sample sock, and they'd see if it was good enough to be accepted, and then they would sell it. So you were kind of the Chinese labor for the force that was going ahead and making it. If you know what I mean, somebody at home was doing this, and there was very strict quality control, from what I understand. A lot of people bought them and were unable to make money on them because their quality control was not good enough to do it. I'm not sure what kind of yarn was actually used back then. For today's purposes, most of us use one of two kinds of yarn. We either use the hand-painted yarn, which I have here, which was wound on a yarn winder right here. You put this on here like this. You had your swift here. You fed over here, and you turned the crank, and then you fed the yarn onto the bobbin like this, and then you set your bobbin on the ground or on the floor, or she has a stand on hers. And key to making these machines work well is an even feed of yarn with even tension. That's really critical. So the yarn comes up, comes through these various, the yarn carrying the yarn mass down into this apparatus here, and it kind of goes around. So, and when World War I came, we all know what happened in World War I. The men all went off to war, and then of course the women had to make socks. And the rest is kind of history there.
But I had some friends who hooked rugs who also had these machines, 2 of them in fact. And one lady knit lots of socks, and I had a pair of her hand crank socks, and I thought they were the coolest thing, and I was really interested in figuring out how I could get through all of that beautiful sock yarn, because it takes me a while to knit a pair of socks by hand. And so another lady that I knew had gotten, I think, her 3rd or 4th machine, and so she said, you know, I don't need 3 or 4 machines, I only need 2 or 3 machines, I can't remember how many, and so I'm gonna sell this. And I said, okay, what do you want for it, because I want one. So I called my husband and said, yeah, I just bought a sock machine, and which is not a conversation I recommend you have with your husband. At the time, we were only married 3 years, so we were still very much, you know, young and in love or whatever, but or at least early in love, maybe not so young. But and then it sat in a box for 2 years. That was 2 years ago. Yeah, so the machine I wanted so badly, and I bought, and I took home, and it sat in a box. And one of the main reasons it sat in a box is because, like Mary Ann said, I was having a hard time finding somebody who could really help me. Fast forward to last April, I'm walking around at the Greencastle Fiber Arts Festival shopping for my shop that I was getting ready to open in May, and I come across Mary Ann's booth that says A Good Yarn, Greenwood, Indiana, and I see all this yarn, and I say, oh wow, you're from Greenwood? I'm getting ready to open a shop. And so we became good friends pretty quickly. So this is, I've named her Cranky, so Cranky hangs out in the shop now on this nice stand, and Mary Ann helped get me going. So I have not yet knit a sock. I am still working on that. But I feel pretty proud of myself because I took this home over 4th of July weekend, and I took it apart. And I cleaned it and oiled it really well because I thought it sat in my garage in a box. I mean, it was in a protected place, but I wanted to make sure there were a few things that weren't moving correctly. Mary Ann pointed out what those are. And I'm getting to the point now, although last time she came, she's like, yeah, you got your cylinder exactly backwards. So today, I put my cylinder the right way. So anyway, I'm starting to you know, like when you're knitting and you can't see what your knits and your purls, and then suddenly it's like, oh, well, yeah, I can read my knitting. I'm starting to feel that way about Cranky. Like, she and I are getting to know each other, and I can tell when she's backwards, I can tell, you know, what I've done. And I felt pretty confident that I could move her from the shop and bring her here and get her set back up.
The way to go is to find a reputable refurbisher who knows what's going on, or get involved with this. There's an internet listserv called the Sock Knitting Machines on Yahoo. On Sock Knitting Machines, you'll often see them for sale. Price? Well, the low range, I know someone who bought one at a garage sale for $5.
What's the realistic range?
Realistic range is about $1,000 to get one that's in good working order.
I came over, and Mary Ann will bust through my shop if you're ever there when she comes in, especially if we're supposed to be working on the machine. She'll say, the sock machine doctor's in the house. So sometimes come on a Friday afternoon. That's usually when you'll find us messing with the machine. So